Jake had always been my closest friend. The kind of guy you trust with your darkest secrets, your wildest dreams, and your worst mistakes. We'd been through everything together. Bad breakups, near-death nights in college, even the time we got matching scars from an ill-advised bar fight. When Jake said he had a surprise for me, I didn't question it. He knew me better than anyone, sometimes better than I knew myself. "Friday night," he'd said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Be at my place at 8 sharp. Dress nice, bring Lauren, but don't ask any questions." Cryptic much? I'd laughed. "It's worth it. Just trust me." And I did. Maybe that was the problem. The week leading up to Friday was uneventful. Lauren and I barely crossed paths, nothing unusual there. She'd been working late a lot, though I didn't push it. I'd been slammed with my own projects, juggling deadlines that seemed impossible until I made them work. Life was busy, chaotic, but familiar. When Friday rolled around, I pulled on a blazer, combed my hair, and tried to coax Lauren into the same enthusiasm I felt. She looked stunning, as always, but there was a sharpness in her demeanor that didn't sit right with me. Her smile was too quick, her laugh too loud. She downed a glass of wine while we waited for our ride, and by the time we got to Jake's place, I'd already started to feel like I was on the outside of some inside joke. Jake greeted us at the door with a grin wide enough to split his face. "You're gonna love this, man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Come on. Everyone's waiting." Everyone? I looked past him into the dimly lit house, expecting to see a handful of mutual friends, maybe a cousin or two. But the living room was packed. Strangers filled the space, laughing, drinking, moving as if they belonged there. The air smelled of perfume and whiskey, a haze of cigarette smoke lingering near the open windows. "What is this?" I asked, glancing at Lauren. She shrugged, her lips curling into a smirk that didn't feel like hers. "Relax," Jake said, steering me inside. "It's your night." The party was a sensory overload. Too many faces, too many voices, all of them unfamiliar. People I didn't know kept shaking my hand, patting my back, toasting to me like I'd achieved something extraordinary. At first, I thought it was some elaborate networking event Jake had roped me into. But then, someone leaned in and whispered, "You're a lucky guy. You know that? Most wouldn't handle it as well as you." "Handle what?" Before I could ask, Jake reappeared, dragging me toward the back of the house. "Come on," he said, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "There's someone you need to meet." We wove through the crowd until we reached a door at the end of the hall. Jake knocked twice, waited, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. Inside, the mood shifted. The room was darker, quieter, the air thick with a tension I couldn't name. Lauren was already there. She was sitting on the edge of a leather couch, her posture too casual, her smile too sharp. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize, tall, well-dressed, and entirely too comfortable in my wife's presence. "Ryan," Jake said, his voice steady, too steady. "This is Eric." Eric didn't stand. He didn't extend his hand. He just smiled, slow and deliberate, like he knew something I didn't. Lauren didn't move either. She just sat there, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice coming out harder than I intended. Eric leaned back, spreading his arms across the couch. "Your wife's been telling me all about you," he said, his tone dripping with something that made my skin crawl. "What the hell is this?" I turned to Lauren, my heart pounding now. "Who is this guy?" Her smirk deepened. "Why don't you sit down, Ryan? Let's talk." I didn't sit. Couldn't. My pulse was in my ears, my fists clenching at my sides. "Talk about what?" Eric chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made my blood boil. "About how you've been playing the part of the perfect husband while she's been exploring her options." Jake shifted uncomfortably behind me, his usual bravado suddenly gone. "Lauren thought it'd be better if you heard it here," he said, avoiding my gaze. "In a controlled setting." "A controlled setting?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What the hell does that even mean?" Lauren finally stood, smoothing her dress like she was preparing for a board meeting. "It means," she said, her tone as cold as it was dismissive, "you've been living a lie, Ryan, and it's time you faced the truth." I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning, my chest tightening with every second that passed. And then it hit me. This wasn't just a party. It was an ambush. The room seemed to shrink. The air felt heavy, like all the oxygen had been sucked out, leaving me with nothing but confusion and rage. Lauren stood there, calm as a storm before it breaks, while this Eric guy smirked at me like he'd just won some sick game I didn't even know I was playing. I'm sorry, what? The words came out sharp, cutting through the oppressive silence. Lauren crossed her arms, tilting her head like she was annoyed I wasn't catching on. I've been seeing Eric for a while now, she said, her voice detached, like she was telling me about her new favorite coffee shop. Seeing? The word hit like a slap, but the full meaning didn't register immediately. What the hell are you talking about? I demanded, my voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. You've been seeing him? Are you joking right now? Eric leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Look, man, don't take it personally, he said, like that was supposed to make this better. This isn't about you. Lauren just needed something different. Different. I turned back to Lauren, my voice rising. What the hell does that mean? We've been married for 8 years, Lauren. You don't get to just drop this on me in the middle of some circus Jake set up. Jake flinched at the mention of his name, but he didn't move, didn't speak. He looked like a kid caught stealing, his guilt practically radiating off him. Ryan, calm down, Lauren said, her tone infuriatingly even. That's exactly why we're here. I wanted to tell you in a setting where you couldn't fly off the handle and make a scene. Oh, you mean like this scene? I gestured wildly at the room, at Eric, at Jake hovering like some useless referee. You bring me here, ambush me with this crap, and I'm the one making a scene? Lauren rolled her eyes, like I was the irrational one. Look, we've been drifting apart for a long time. You know that. Don't act like this is coming out of nowhere. I felt something snap inside me. You're insane, I said, pointing a shaking finger at her. We've been fine. Yeah, things have been busy, but every couple goes through that. You don't get to rewrite our entire marriage just to justify whatever this is. Her calm mask cracked for the first time. Fine, she spat, her voice rising. You think this marriage has been fine? You work all the time, you barely pay attention to me, and when you do, it's like you're just going through the motions. I stared at her, stunned. So your solution is this guy? I shot a glare at Eric, who just sat there, smirking like a man who had absolutely nothing to lose. You don't talk to me, you don't try to fix anything. You just jump into bed with some stranger and call it a solution? Eric chuckled again, that same low, infuriating laugh. Not a stranger, man. We've been getting to know each other pretty well. It was a mistake to look at him. The way he lounged there, so smug, so sure of himself, sent a wave of white-hot anger crashing over me. Before I knew it, I was moving, lunging toward him, fists clenched, ready to wipe that smirk off his face. Jake stepped in just in time, grabbing my arms and pulling me back. Ryan, stop, he shouted, his voice panicked. Don't do this. It's not worth it. Not worth it, I yelled, struggling against his grip. This guy screws my wife and I'm supposed to just sit here and take it? Yeah, Eric said casually, standing up. You might want to listen to your buddy. Wouldn't want this to get any uglier than it already is. I froze, staring at him in disbelief. The audacity, the sheer gall of this guy was almost more than I could comprehend. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice low and shaking with fury. Both of you. Lauren sighed, brushing a hand through her hair like she was bored of the whole conversation. Ryan, this isn't about Eric. It's about us. About how we've been stuck in this rut for years. You're not happy. I'm not happy. We're just going through the motions. I felt like I was choking, my mind spinning as I tried to make sense of her words. You don't get to decide that for me, I said, my voice breaking. You don't get to just throw everything away because you're bored. Her face hardened. It's not boredom. It's survival. I needed something more, Ryan, and clearly you weren't willing to give it. Eric stepped closer, his expression mockingly sympathetic. Look, man, I get it. You're angry. You have every right to be. But maybe it's time to face the facts. You weren't enough for her. It happens. I felt my fist twitch again, but Jake's grip tightened, holding me back. Let it go, he whispered, his voice desperate. Don't do something you'll regret. Regret? I was already drowning in it. Regret for trusting Jake, for loving Lauren, for not seeing this coming. But most of all, regret for thinking I could ever get through this without losing everything. And that's when Lauren delivered the final blow. Ryan, she said, her voice cold and final. This is over. I'm done pretending. It's time we both move on. Her words hit like a freight train, shattering what little composure I had left. I stared at her, my wife, the woman I thought I knew, and realized she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't even apologizing. She was leaving, and she wanted me to watch her go. The silence after Lauren's words was deafening, broken only by the low hum of distant voices from the party outside. My legs felt unsteady, my chest tightening like someone had clamped a vice around my ribs. You're done pretending? I repeated, my voice hoarse. I was still processing, still trying to make sense of how 8 years of marriage could be reduced to this cold, clinical dismissal. Lauren didn't flinch. If anything, she looked relieved, like unburdening herself of me had set her free. Yes, Ryan. I'm done, she said, her tone sharp and unforgiving. Eric was still standing there, his presence like a taunt. He shoved his hands into his pockets, rocking back on his heels as if this was a casual Tuesday night for him. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Now you can focus on yourself. Jake stepped back, sensing the shift in me. He let go of my arms, and for a split second, I thought about lunging at Eric again. But as I looked around the room, at Jake's guilt-ridden face, at Lauren's smug detachment, at Eric's infuriating smirk, I realized something. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to break, to lose control, to prove that I was the irrational one. Not tonight. You're unbelievable, I said to Lauren, my voice steady now. I stepped back, crossing my arms to keep my hands from shaking. You couldn't just talk to me, could you? You had to orchestrate this. This spectacle? What kind of person does that? Lauren shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than any shouting match ever could. I didn't think you'd take it well, and clearly I was right. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound, right? Because blindsiding me with your boyfriend in the middle of a party is so much more civilized. Eric took a step closer, his expression tightening. Hey man, watch how you talk to her. That was it. That was the line. You don't get to talk to me? I snapped, pointing a finger at him. You don't get to stand there in my face in my friend's house and act like you're some kind of victim in this. Eric raised his hands in mock surrender, but his smirk never wavered. Just trying to keep the peace. Jake finally spoke up, his voice shaky. Look, Ryan, maybe we should all just take a step back and cool off. This is a lot, I get it, but I rounded on him, my anger boiling over. You knew, didn't you? You knew this was happening, and you still brought me here. Jake's face crumpled, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. I didn't want to, man. Lauren said it was the only way to. To what? I shouted. Humiliate me? Put on a show for her new boyfriend. Ryan, stop, Lauren interjected, her voice sharp. Jake's not the bad guy here. No, Lauren, you are. I shot back. You planned this. You manipulated him. Just like you've been manipulating me for who knows how long. Lauren's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of anger behind her calm facade. Don't you dare turn this around on me, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You're the one who checked out of this marriage first. You're the one who's been coasting while I did all the work. Work? I laughed again, a sharp, bitter sound. Is that what you call sneaking around with him? Is that what you call lying to my face every day? Eric stepped in again, his voice dangerously calm. All right, that's enough. You've said your piece, now it's time to go. I turned to him, my voice cold. Don't push me. The tension was unbearable. The air so thick it felt like it was pressing down on me. And then, as if the universe decided I hadn't had enough, the door burst open. A woman I didn't recognize stood there, her face flushed, her eyes wide with confusion. Jake, she said, her voice trembling. What the hell is going on in here? Jake paled. Lisa. Oh no. Lauren's smirk returned, sharper than ever. Guess the cat's out of the bag, she said, glancing at Jake. Lisa stared at all of us. Me, Lauren, Eric, and finally Jake, who looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. What is this? She asked again, her voice rising. What are you all doing in here? Ask your boyfriend, I said, my voice flat. Jake's face crumpled, and for a brief moment, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. If he thought he could betray me and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn otherwise. Lisa's face hardened. Jake, she said, her voice ice cold. Explain. Now. Jake stammered, his words tripping over each other as he tried to piece together a defense. But it was too late. The damage was done. I looked at Lauren, then at Eric, and finally at Jake. Enjoy your party, I said, my voice steady but laced with venom. And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving them all to deal with the mess they'd created. The night air hit me like a slap. It was colder than I expected, or maybe that was just the adrenaline leaving my body, leaving me hollow and trembling. The muffled sounds of the party faded as I stormed down the street, fists clenched, jaw tight, my mind spinning with everything I'd just witnessed. Lauren, Eric, Jake. Each name brought a fresh wave of anger and betrayal. I couldn't even decide who I was angrier at. Lauren, for her cold, calculated betrayal. Eric, for being so smug about it. Or Jake, my so-called best friend, who had orchestrated the whole thing like I was some pawn in their twisted game. I made it a few blocks before the weight of it all hit me. My legs gave out and I sat down hard on a bench near the park. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The memories of the night kept replaying, over and over, like a loop I couldn't escape. Her voice echoed in my head. I'm done pretending. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, like I was the one who had failed her, like I was the villain in her story. I buried my face in my hands, trying to steady myself, but the anger kept bubbling up, threatening to consume me. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she come home late, looking me in the eye, knowing she was lying? And Jake? How could he stand there, knowing what he knew, and still pretend to be my friend? The sound of a car pulling up broke me out of my spiral. I looked up to see a familiar black SUV. The passenger window rolled down, and Jake's face appeared, pale and desperate. Ryan, man, get in, he said. I stood, my body stiff and unwilling. What the hell do you want, Jake? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I screwed up. Okay? I didn't know it would turn into that. Into what? I snapped, stepping closer to the car. You didn't know Lauren was going to ambush me with her boyfriend? You didn't know she'd spent God knows how long plotting to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers? I didn't know it'd go that far, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I thought. She said it was the best way to handle things, and You listened to her. I interrupted, my voice sharp. You listened to her instead of thinking for 1 second about what this would do to me. You were supposed to have my back, Jake. You were supposed to be my friend. I am your friend, he shouted, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. I messed up, okay? But I didn't want to see you get hurt. Then you're an idiot, I said flatly, because all you did was make it worse. You stood there and watched while they tore me apart. And for what? So she could feel better about herself. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. You're just as bad as she is, I said, my voice cold. Actually, no, you're worse. She's my wife, Jake. She betrayed me, but at least she had the guts to look me in the eye while she did it. You hid behind her like a coward. The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He looked away, his face contorted with guilt. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Save it, I said, stepping back from the car. Go home, Jake. I don't ever want to see you again. He didn't argue. He just nodded, his shoulders slumping as he rolled up the window and drove away. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring down the empty street, the silence pressing in around me. The night felt darker now, colder, as if the world itself had turned its back on me. Finally, I pulled out my phone and opened a rideshare app. There was no way I was going back to that house, back to that mess. I needed to be anywhere but there. As I waited for the car, I made a decision. This wasn't over. Not yet. Lauren thought she could humiliate me and walk away. Jake thought he could betray me and offer a half-hearted apology. Eric thought he could smirk his way through this without consequences. They were all wrong. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. The next morning, I woke up to the first rays of sunlight stabbing through the blinds in my hotel room. I had barely slept. My mind had replayed the night over and over until exhaustion finally claimed me sometime around 4 a.m. Even now, the memories felt like bruises I kept pressing on just to remind myself the pain was real. Lauren's cold words. Jake's betrayal. Eric's smug face. I sat up, my head pounding, the weight of what had happened pressing down like a lead blanket. For a few moments, I just stared at my phone sitting on the nightstand. No texts, no calls. Part of me had hoped, foolishly, that Lauren would reach out, that she'd explain, apologize, something. But there was nothing. She was probably with him. Eric. The thought was like acid in my veins. I didn't know what my next move was going to be, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit back and let them walk all over me. I wasn't going to be the guy who quietly faded into the background while they played out their little drama. The first step was Lauren. I called her, and to my surprise, she picked up on the second ring. "Ryan," she said, her voice flat. No emotion. No apology. Just my name, like she was answering a call from work. "We need to talk," I said, skipping any pleasantries. "I think we've said everything there is to say," she replied. I laughed, the sound bitter and humorless. "Oh, I don't think we've even scratched the surface. You blindsided me last night, Lauren. You humiliated me in front of a room full of people. And for what? To feel better about your lies. Ryan, I'm not doing this with you," she said, her tone icy. "It's over. We both know it. Dragging it out isn't going to help either of us." "Dragging it out?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Lauren, you're acting like this was some mutual decision. You cheated on me. You lied to me. And then you paraded it in front of everyone like it was some kind of performance." There was a pause, just long enough to make me wonder if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, detached. "You want the truth, Ryan? Fine. I've been unhappy for years. I felt trapped, stuck in a marriage that was going nowhere. Eric gave me a way out. And Jake," I shot back. "What about him? Was he just collateral damage in your little plan?" "Jake tried to help," she said sharply. "He didn't want to get involved, but I needed someone to help manage the situation." "Manage the situation?" I said, disbelief dripping from every word. "You talk about our marriage like it's a failing business you're trying to liquidate." "That's because it is," she snapped. "Ryan, we haven't been happy in years. You just didn't want to admit it." Her words stung more than I cared to admit, but I wasn't about to let her rewrite the narrative. "You don't get to decide how I felt," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And you don't get to turn this around on me. You're the one who lied. You're the one who cheated. Whatever problems we had, you don't get to use them as an excuse for what you did." She sighed, the sound full of irritation, like I was wasting her time. "Look, Ryan, I know you're angry. I get it. But we both need to move on. There's no point dragging this out any longer." Her apathy was like a slap to the face. I realized then that the woman I thought I knew was gone, if she had ever really existed. This wasn't the Lauren I had fallen in love with, the woman I had built my life around. This was someone else entirely. "Don't worry," I said, my voice cold. "I'm not dragging anything out. You'll get your wish, Lauren. We're done." Before she could respond, I hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The conversation had left me angry, but it had also given me clarity. Lauren was done with me, and that was fine. But I wasn't done with her, not yet. I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. Not after everything she'd done. That's when I remembered the files. A few weeks ago, Lauren had asked me to fix her laptop. She'd been complaining about it running slow, and I had offered to clean it up for her. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, I had just installed some updates, deleted old files, and moved on. But now I wondered if there was something else on that laptop. Something that might explain how long this had been going on. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. If Lauren wanted to play dirty, she was about to learn that I could play too. The drive to the house was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles white against the leather. My mind raced, fueled by the anger from my conversation with Lauren and the gnawing need for answers. When I got to the house, it felt eerily empty. Her car wasn't in the driveway, confirming what I already knew. She wasn't here, probably off with him. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a physical weight. The living room was exactly as we had left it 2 nights ago, the coffee table still cluttered with magazines and an empty wine glass. A place that had once felt like home now felt foreign, like I was trespassing in someone else's life. I didn't have time to linger on the memories. I went straight to her home office, flipping on the light. The laptop was where she always kept it, sitting on the desk in front of a neat row of color-coded notebooks. Lauren liked order. She liked things to be in their place, predictable and controlled. How ironic, considering the chaos she'd thrown my life into. I powered on the laptop and logged in. Her password hadn't changed. I half expected to be greeted with nothing but innocuous work files and emails, proof that my suspicions were just paranoia fueled by rage. But then I saw the folder. It was buried 3 levels deep, hidden inside a folder labeled Budget Projections under her work directory. If I hadn't been deliberately looking for something out of place, I might have missed it. The folder was named simply Personal. I clicked it open and my stomach dropped. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each labeled with dates going back nearly a year. The most recent one was from last week. My heart pounded as I opened it, my mind screaming at me to stop even as my hands kept moving. Photos, videos, screenshots of messages. It was all there. Lauren and Eric, smiling for the camera like a couple on vacation. Lauren lounging on a hotel bed, her face glowing with a smile I hadn't seen in years. Texts where they discussed their next meetup, their thinly veiled euphemisms making my skin crawl. But it wasn't just Eric. There were messages with other men too. Flirty exchanges, suggestive photos, dates and times that didn't match the excuses she'd given me for late nights at work. My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence. Each click of the mouse another knife in my gut. This wasn't just an affair. This was a lifestyle. My chest tightened as I realized the depth of her betrayal. This wasn't one mistake, one lapse in judgment. Lauren had been living a double life, lying to my face every single day while I worked to support us, to build a future I thought we both wanted. I slammed the laptop shut and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as the weight of it all crashed down on me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about how far she was willing to go to protect her lies. And then I remembered something. Jake. He had said Lauren asked him to manage the situation. At the time, I had assumed he was talking about the party, about how to break the news to me in the most humiliating way possible. But now I wasn't so sure. If Lauren had been cheating with more than just Eric and Jake had known about it, then maybe he wasn't just a pawn in her game. Maybe he was part of it. The thought made my blood boil. Jake had been my best friend for years. He had been in my wedding, for God's sake. And now I was starting to wonder just how deep his involvement went. I stood up, pacing the room as the pieces began to click into place. Lauren had used me. Jake had betrayed me. And Eric was just another player in her twisted little game. But now I had the truth. I grabbed a flash drive from the desk drawer and plugged it into the laptop. It took less than 5 minutes to copy everything from that folder. Every photo, every message, every incriminating file. When it was done, I slipped the drive into my pocket and powered down the laptop. This wasn't just about confronting Lauren anymore. This was about taking control. About making sure she couldn't twist the narrative or paint herself as the victim. If she wanted to play dirty, I was ready. I was done being the passive one, the guy who let life happen to him. It was time to fight back. And I knew exactly where to start by the time I left the house. The flash drive burned a metaphorical hole in my pocket, its weight heavier than it should have been. It wasn't just a collection of files, it was leverage. Proof. Justice waiting to be served. I couldn't sit on it. I wouldn't. The car ride was silent except for the low hum of the engine as I drove to Jake's apartment. The betrayal was still fresh, raw, but the evidence I'd uncovered had given me clarity. Jake was involved one way or another, and I needed to know how deep his part went. When I arrived, his car was in the lot. Good. I didn't bother knocking. I banged on the door with the kind of force that warned whoever was inside this wasn't a casual visit. "Jake!" I yelled. After a tense moment, the door opened. Jake stood there, his face pale and drawn, his usual cocky demeanor stripped away. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped back to let me in. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "How long?" I asked, my voice sharp. Jake closed the door, his shoulders slumping. "How long what?" I stared him down, refusing to let him dodge. "How long have you known Lauren was cheating on me? And don't you dare lie to me, Jake. Not after everything." His eyes darted away, guilt written all over his face. "Ryan, answer the question," I snapped. Jake let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "A few months," he admitted finally. "She told me about Eric first. Then I found out about the others." I felt my jaw tighten. "And you didn't think to tell me? You didn't think I had the right to know my wife was screwing around with half the city?" "It wasn't like that," Jake said quickly, holding up his hands. She said she'd tell you when the time was right, that it wasn't my place to get involved." "And you believed her?" I said, my voice laced with venom. He looked down, ashamed. "I thought I was helping. She said you'd blow up if you found out the wrong way. That it'd be better if it came from her." "Better?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You call that party better?" "She didn't tell me, Jake. She humiliated me, and you helped her do it." Jake flinched, but he didn't argue. "I didn't know about the party," he said quietly. "She told me it was just supposed to be a small thing. I didn't realize she planned to bring Eric until it was too late." "Too late?" I stepped closer, my voice rising. "You could have stopped it. You could have told me what was going on before it got to that point. But instead, you stood there and let her rip my life apart like it was some kind of show." "I'm sorry," Jake said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know what to do, Ryan. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I screwed up. I know that." The anger simmered just below the surface, threatening to boil over. But then I remembered the flash drive in my pocket, the files that told a much bigger story. "You think you screwed up?" I said, my tone icy. "You don't even know the half of it." Jake frowned. "What are you talking about?" I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it up. "I went through her laptop, Jake. I saw everything. The photos, the texts, the other men. This wasn't just about Eric. She's been lying to me for years." His face went pale. "Years?" I nodded, my jaw tight. "And you? You knew enough to stop this, to warn me, but you didn't. That makes you complicit, Jake." He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I didn't know it was like that. I swear, Ryan, I didn't know about the others. If you had," I interrupted. "You would have done what? Stayed quiet anyway? Let her destroy me piece by piece while you stood on the sidelines?" Jake didn't respond, and the silence was answer enough. I took a step back, the weight of everything hitting me again. This wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It wasn't just about Eric or even Jake. This was about betrayal on every level. My wife, my best friend, my entire sense of stability torn apart. But this time, I wasn't going to be a victim. "I'm done with you," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm done being the guy everyone thinks they can walk all over. You want to feel sorry for yourself? Fine. But stay the hell out of my way." Jake looked up, his eyes filled with regret. But I didn't care anymore. I turned and walked out, leaving him behind just like I planned to leave all of this behind. The next step was clear. Lauren had started this game, but she had underestimated me. It was time to show her and everyone else that I wasn't someone to be underestimated. The drive to Lauren's office was tense, my mind a storm of anger, betrayal, and something colder, determination. I had spent too long playing by her rules, trusting her lies, letting her dictate the narrative. That was over. I parked across the street and waited, watching as people filed in and out of the sleek glass building. I called ahead, knowing her schedule better than she realized. The receptionist had told me she was in a meeting but expected to finish soon. Good. I wanted her full attention. 15 minutes later, she appeared. She looked polished, as always. Hair perfect, heels clicking confidently against the pavement as she walked toward her car. She didn't see me at first, and that gave me a moment to study her. This woman wasn't the Lauren I thought I'd married. She was a stranger wearing her face, and today I was going to make sure she knew it. "Lauren," I called, stepping out of the car. She froze, her hand on the door handle, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. "Ryan," she said, her voice cool. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, crossing the street toward her. "I think we've talked enough," she replied, turning back to her car. "Not about this." I held up the flash drive. That stopped her. She turned slowly, her expression faltering for the first time. "What's that?" "You tell me," I said, my voice sharp. "It's from your laptop. You know, the one you so generously let me fix for you a few weeks ago. Turns out, Lauren, you're not as careful as you think." Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw something that looked like fear. But she recovered quickly, straightening her posture and folding her arms. "You went through my computer? That's a violation of my privacy." "Privacy?" I laughed, the sound bitter. "Don't talk to me about privacy, Lauren. Not after what you've been doing behind my back. You lost the right to complain about privacy the moment you decided our marriage didn't mean anything to you." She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. "I know about Eric," I said, stepping closer. "I know about the others. I know everything, Lauren. And I have proof." Her expression hardened. "And what exactly are you planning to do with it?" "That depends," I said, my voice cold. "You wanted to humiliate me, didn't you? That whole party was a setup, a way to make me look weak, to make you feel powerful. But here's the thing, you miscalculated." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. "I've got messages," I continued. "Photos, videos, enough to ruin your little facade of control. Do you think your boss would like to know what you've been doing during those late-night work meetings? Or maybe Eric's wife?" "Oh, you didn't think I'd look him up, did you?" Lauren's face finally cracked, her eyes widening. "You wouldn't. Try me?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Ryan, let's be reasonable. What do you even want? Revenge? That's not going to fix anything." "Reasonable," I echoed. "You humiliated me, Lauren. You lied to me, betrayed me, and then had the audacity to blame me for it. You don't get to stand here and ask for reason." She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Fine. What do you want? Money? The house? Just name it and we can move on." I shook my head, a cold smile curling on my lips. "What I want, Lauren, is for you to understand that you don't hold the cards anymore. You wanted to destroy me? Well, now it's your turn to feel what that's like." For the first time, her confidence cracked entirely. "Ryan, don't do this. Please. Don't worry," I said, turning back toward my car. "I won't send this to your boss. Or Eric's wife. Not yet, anyway. Consider this a warning." "Ryan," she started, but I cut her off. "You want it out? You got it. But you're not walking away clean, Lauren. You're going to remember me. Every time you think about what you've done, every time you look in the mirror, you'll remember that you didn't win." I got into my car and started the engine. Her stunned face the last thing I saw before I drove away. As I turned the corner, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of her betrayal was still there, but it didn't crush me anymore. I wasn't her victim. Not anymore. This wasn't the end for me. It was a new beginning.